Hello and welcome back to Sugar and Frights. I'm here to do my second review of the year. I appreciate you all for coming back, or if this is your first time, I'm just getting started on this channel, so I appreciate you all sticking with me. So while the last review was on a movie that may have flown under the radar, this one most likely hasn't, and of course that is Wolfman, which was released on January 17th, this most recent Friday. It is a wide theatrical release, so it's most likely showing at your local movie theater. If you do check it out and you have thoughts, please feel free to comment down below. The movie was written and directed by Leigh Whannel. It is also co-written by his wife, Corbett Tuck, who you may know from the Insidious movies. She was in 1 and 3, I believe. It is also produced by Blumhouse, so it is a pretty big feature that is out in theaters right now. So for those of you who have been watching horror movies for a long time, such as myself, you're probably already pretty aware of Leigh Whannell, most notably known for his starring role and co-creation in the 2004 original Saw movie. Him and James Wan were the minds behind that movie. They did a lot of work on it personally. They had a very minimal budget. Saw has a very special place in my heart, which you will come to know as part of my channel. I do have the Billy mask behind me on my wall. Leigh Whannell has also directed a few movies. He did Upgrade in 2018, as well as Invisible Man in 2020. So whereas James Wan is pretty prolific in releasing a lot of different movies and being responsible for a fair amount of like the popcorn horror that we see coming out in theaters, Leigh Whannell is a little more subtle in his directorial career, only doing a handful of movies really in the last 5 to 10 years. But all have been received pretty well. I have seen Upgrade. It's been a while, so I might be due for a rewatch. But I did really, really love the 2020 Invisible Man. So part of what I'm trying to do on this channel is to break down my reviews into baking themed categories. The first of which being the recipe. So this is the elements that go into the story. So talking about elements, and I'm going to try to keep it as vague as possible. There shouldn't be any spoilers in this part of the review. There will be spoilers later, but I will point those out when they do come. So the official synopsis for this movie on IMDb reads, a family at a remote farmhouse is attacked by an unseen animal, but as the night stretches on, the father begins to transform into something unrecognizable. So hopefully that's not too much of a spoiler for you. If you've already seen the trailer, that's kind of already explained. So the family, it's a family of three. The mother, Charlotte, who's played by Julia Garner, the father, whose name is Blake, who's played by Christopher Abbott, and the daughter, her name is Ginger, and she's played by Matilda Firth. So the movie kind of starts, it has an entry scene that sort of explains another family dynamic, but I'll let you get into that one. So the family, they're struggling sort of interpersonally. They're having a difficult time communicating with one another for a variety of reasons. The dad works at home, so spends the most of the time with his daughter, and the mom, she is a journalist, so she works a lot, and you can kind of see this dynamic playing out in the beginning of the movie. They find out that a family member has been declared deceased and that a property is now in their possession. So the family packs themselves up into a big moving van with the intention of going to the rural Oregon wilderness to get all the stuff out of the property and essentially just spend some time together, hoping that it'll be something that might reunite them. So for recipe, we have the setup being a family traveling into the Oregon wilderness to stay at a farmhouse, a secluded farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. And the introduction to the movie gives us sort of a background on the Wolfman folklore, right? So we know that this is going to be something where there's going to be transformations, there's going to be sort of otherworldly monsters, that sort of thing. It's also listed as a werewolf movie, first and foremost, right? As well as body horror. So we know that there's going to be elements of body horror, elements of transformations, right, within this sort of secluded space, and then the tensions built by the family dynamics. So, the second category that I'm trying to incorporate into my baking themed review is the flavors. So, for this, I'm thinking of the themes, the motifs, just kind of the central ideology within the movie. And this is a little bit more subjective. I think this is something that um, each of us might find a little bit different in the movie. So obviously you have the central idea of the wolf man or werewolf, right? A man, human, um, wolf hybrid, I guess. And this is something that's appeared in a lot of different movies and stories throughout the years. In the movie, it is said that it's part of an indigenous folklore. I did some preliminary Google searching and didn't find anything that was directly correlated in that sense. It seems like with indigenous cultures, there's a sort of reverence for the wolf, but no specific stories that I could find about the face of the wolf, which is what is stated in the beginning of the movie. So you do have that as the sort of central theme, right, of man transforming into animal, sort of losing your ability to think rationally, right, like primal instinct, that sort of thing. But I think what is more central to this particular story is the theme of family and generational trauma. Um, and it's seen with the family that we follow throughout the movie, but also relatives of one of the family members that sort of get incorporated back into the story. And just a side note, if you know of any indigenous lore that sort of matches what they're talking about in the beginning of this movie, I'd be really curious to know about that. I read a couple of reviews that talked about it, but then didn't really link it to anything in particular. And just looking on Google, I didn't see anything. So I'd be really interested if there is sort of a folklore basis or an indigenous lore behind that sort of storytelling. So the next part we'll talk about is the execution. So when we have a recipe, we have our ingredients and we have our flavors set up, we start the process of baking it, right, to ultimately get hopefully something good. So this is thinking about how Leigh Whannel, in particular in this case, used all of the things that we already talked about to execute the movie itself. So there were a couple things in the execution that I struggled with. First, being the movie is very dark, and I don't mean thematically, I mean it's difficult to see a lot of the time. The whole story takes place within one night. So, aside from the introduction, the beginning of the movie, there is no daylight, and there's very minimal lighting in the house that the movie takes place in. So I would imagine that when people start watching this on streaming, they might have a hard time with how dark it is. You're probably going to have to watch this with your blackout curtains at nighttime. So that was one thing. It was very dark. I don't think it was a deal breaker. I think it needed to be dark, but it is a little challenging to see at times. Um, the acting, I think, was really good. There wasn't a lot that I had issue with. Mostly what I struggled with was the dialogue. There was moments of really, really cheesy dialogue that just didn't really feel like it fit. And it sort of took me out of the immersion of the experience. I think that the family had a good chemistry. They worked as a family, but some of the writing on the lines just felt really clunky to me. In terms of the pacing, I think the movie dragged a little bit towards the beginning. They really gave us a lot of time for the setup, and then once things sort of reached the climax, they were over very quickly. So I was left feeling like I wanted a little bit more meat in the middle, if you know what I mean. I think my favorite dynamic was between Blake, the dad, and his daughter Ginger. They had a lot of really cute moments, a lot of cute sort of things that the way of speaking to each other, things that were established in the beginning of the movie and then were used throughout the movie just as sort of a way to humanize the dad, especially with everything that he was going through throughout the movie. All right, so the last part we'll talk about is what I'm deciding to now to call the frights as part of the sugar and frights. We did the sugar, so now we're talking frights. This movie was not very scary. And again, that's subjective. Everyone sort of has their different tastes, different endurance levels for scary. I found this movie to be pretty tame in that regard. There were times where I felt a little bit tense, but for the most part, I was just along for the ride. It does have minimal jump scares, which I appreciated. A lot of the sort of creature shots are done without any music, which is something that I absolutely enjoy. Just seeing just like a glimmer of something without any loud noises. I appreciate that more than sort of a cheap jump scare, though I'm not opposed to jump scares. I just think they need to be done sort of strategically. Um, what else about the horror? I think the body horror was pretty good. I wish it was grosser, but I always wish it was grosser. I just want it to be gross. I want it to be so gross. And it was gross. Um, but it was minimal. We didn't see a lot, and like I said, the middle of the movie sort of went by so fast for me. I would have loved to sit with the gore, sit with the grossness of it just a little bit more. You did have a couple horror movie cliches, specifically like person in the road, veering off and getting in a wreck, that sort of thing, which hopefully isn't a spoiler. It was in the trailer. Um, which I'm not opposed to it. A lot of movies that I really love do that. Silent Hill, I think the Shutter remake, also did that. I'm not opposed to it. It's a little overused, just a tiny bit. I know people were a little underwhelmed by the appearance of the Wolfman. I think people compared it to the original Universal monster and then some of the remakes where he is very wolf like. Um, I won't say too much about it. I'll talk more about it in spoilers. I didn't mind the presentation, but I don't have a lot of nostalgia tied to the original Wolfman movies, so it didn't bum me out. Again, I wish it was grosser, but that's just me. So, on to spoilers. So, if you don't want to be spoiled at all, stop the video now, go see it in your local theater, and then come back and tell me what you thought about it. I'll just be kind of going a little deeper into the plot and then talking about the ending and talking about some things that I liked, didn't like, that sort of thing. I think the biggest spoiler probably is the ending, sort of the ending, maybe like the third act of the movie, where it is revealed that the Wolfman who's been chasing them, who infected Blake, is actually Blake's father. And the beginning of the film, which I didn't talk about prior to spoilers, sort of establishes their relationship as him being someone who is very hard and sort of has a military type background, is kind of what it seems just by the way that he's presented. And so you have this sort of theme of the generational trauma of Blake trying not to become his father, but then becoming his father in this very literal sort of sense. And I just felt like the fight scene was over so quickly. I really wanted more fighting, more blood, more guts. I just feel like we had this one really tense fight scene, and then again, it was over before um, you could really feel it. I don't know. It fell flat for me, and I hope that it didn't fall flat for y'all. If it was more impactful for you, please let me know. I'd love to maybe revisit it in the future. The family dynamic thing, the family theme, the whole family thing felt very heavy-handed to me. I did say in the beginning of this video that the fact that it was co-written by Leigh Whannell's wife, so they wrote it together, would be something I might talk about in the rest of the movie. And I think that movie was written by parents. It feels very much like a movie that is written by two people who have kids together, and I believe they have three kids together. Um, I don't personally have kids, so maybe this movie hits a little harder if you are a parent. It just felt like it was kind of beating me over the head with the family drama part of it, which I don't think is a bad thing, but I needed more horror to it. I don't feel like it was balanced in the sense that it was a family sort of generational trauma movie, and that took center stage. over some of the more frightening, gory elements. I'm just really bummed it wasn't grosser, and I'm just going to keep coming back to that. So, the last thing I want to talk about is kind of a dorky, geeky thing of mine, in that I spent most of the movie looking for the Saw Easter egg. And if you know what I'm talking about, welcome. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, in Leigh Whannell's movies, he puts in a little Saw Easter egg. There's one in Upgrade, and there's one in The Invisible Man. So when I went into the theaters to see this movie, I was waiting for the Saw Easter egg. And I believe I found it. I believe what it is the scene where Charlotte sort of creates a trap for Blake, and he gets his foot caught in a bear trap, and then he has to essentially bite his own leg off to get off out of the trap. And there's a shot where he's crawling away from his severed foot in the bear trap, and it is very Carrie Elwes crawling on the bathroom floor after sawing his foot off. So I'm betting that that's what it was. I'm betting that that was the Easter egg. So I was really happy to see that. I had that Leonardo DiCaprio like pointing me moment in the theater. I was like, there it is. I knew it was coming. So that was fun, and I appreciated that. And if Leigh Whannell continues making movies, I will always look for the Saw Easter egg, so I appreciate him doing that. And last fun fact, I guess, about this movie is that Leigh Whannell actually did a little cameo. He is the voice on the radio that the dad is talking to at the beginning of the movie, so that's kind of fun too. I saw him on the IMDb page listed, and I was like, "Who is that character?" And that's who it was. So fun little cameo there as well. All right, so that wraps up my thoughts on Wolfman. I give it, I believe, a 3.5 out of 5. Um, I liked it. I don't know if I'd rewatch it. It had some things that I liked. It had some things that I didn't. I wish it was grosser. I wish it was scarier. But I'm always happy to see Leigh Whannell doing stuff. So I'll always look out for his next movies. But yeah, solid. I think 3.5. Maybe I'll watch again. I don't know. I think I'm going to revisit Upgrade though. So thank you all for watching my second review. There's going to be at least 2 more new releases that I'm hoping to review this month. So take a look out for those. I'm also planning to do at least 2 baking themed videos. So that is going to be another part of this channel. And hopefully I'll have those up for you pretty soon as well. But feel free to follow me on Letterboxd. I put all of the movies that I watch throughout the month there, as well as like and subscribe. I'm going to try to make this a pretty consistent thing. So bear with me on working out the technicals, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks.